All right, so it's about 4. Let's wait like another minute-ish just to see if any other students want to get on, then we'll get started.
Mute myself briefly.
It's crazy that the weather pattern is so different in Houston versus Austin, even though we're so close to you guys.
Yeah.
Like we just get rain, and I think it was like raining pretty hard last night, but there were no major outages. No one was that concerned.
No, Houston weather is crazy. It just changes like every hour. Like 1 hour is going to be like, oh, thunderstorms. And then you look outside and it's sunny. But yeah, I think we can go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone here to the second panel that we have for the PEAC and Global Shapers Leadership and Service Series. PEAC is a Houston-based NPO that provides mentorship and empowers youth to work on community service projects in their communities. And the Global Shapers is an arm of the World Economic Forum and is a network of young people driving action and change in their communities. So we kind of collaborated together and wanted to put on this speaker series for you all, just so everyone can kind of learn a little bit more about these esteemed members' careers, some tips they might have for you guys. So I hope everyone can benefit from this. And thanks again to our panelists. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our 3 panelists today. So Jessie Wang is our first panelist. She has spent most of her working career at various tech companies, including an ed tech company in Beijing, Indeed, a hiring company, and Expedia, a travel company. She also enjoys running, hiking, and generally the outdoors. Ramez is our second panelist. He is currently a medical student in the EnMed program, pursuing a combined Doctor of Medicine and Masters of Engineering degree. EnMed is a first-in-the-nation joint initiative between Texas A&M College of Medicine and Houston Methodist Hospital to train the next generation of physician engineers. His main focus is in combining his background in healthcare, business, and technology to bridge the gap and provide innovation. Our last and third speaker is Raul Rodriguez, and he is the Vice President in Stout's Valuation Advisory Board. Outside of work, Raul is a current curator for the Global Shapers Houston Hub and has been involved as a board member of the Houston chapter of Young Professionals in Finance and as the Young Alumni Connect coordinator for the North Dame Alumni Club of Houston. He's also a committee member for the Houston Cellar Classic, a wine and food event hosted to raise funds for Genesis Works, an organization which helps high school students in underserved communities. Raul holds a BBA in finance from the University of Notre Dame and a master's in finance from Southern Methodist University. So I want to say thanks again to our panelists, and without much being said, we can kind of get into our first question here. So we can start with Raul here. Can you just share a little bit about your industry and your job in general for our students here, please?
Yeah, sure thing. And thanks for having us, Michelle, with your students. It's great to have you all. A little bit about myself. So I work in finance and evaluation firm. Essentially, in a nutshell, that is an appraiser. So I value businesses, whether it is for litigation purposes. A simple example of that would be like a divorce case. If an individual owns a business that's privately held, you don't really know what the value is. It's not like Apple or Facebook that you can go online and see what the stock's valued at. When it's private, you have to value it. You have to hire a third party to value it. For example, in a divorce matter, just to see how it would be split, or other purposes that are similar would be, like estate, like tax purposes. If an individual, a wealthy individual, dies and he has a private company that his sons and daughters are going to inherit, then the IRS is going to take a chunk of that in taxes. So in a nutshell, it's an appraiser business. We value businesses or shareholder actions for different purposes, and it's a finance job. It's a heavy finance job.
Great. Thank you for the introduction. Ramez, can you go ahead and share a little bit about yourself in the industry, please?
Sure. Thanks, Vishal, for having me. So as Vishal mentioned, I'm still a student. I'm a medical student, but I can envision and tell you a little bit more about what I envision my day-to-day to look like. Keep in mind that this is also a first in the nation program, so I can't just point at someone and say it's going to be like this person over there, because we're kind of creating our own path as we move along. But as Vishal mentioned, it's physician engineer, so we're calling ourselves physicianeers. You're both a physician and an engineer in your day-to-day life. And what that really entails is that you're still able to connect with patients and treat them like a physician, but you also have the knowledge and training to innovate and apply engineering principles towards any identified gaps or patient needs. And you're able to create medical devices or wearable technology to help those patients. And in my opinion, this fusion between medicine and engineering is a really wonderful thing.
Great. Thank you for that. Jessie, can you just go ahead and share a little about yourself and your industry and job, please?
Yeah, I'm also really excited to be here. I'm always like really curious to also answer any questions that you guys have, and so I want to make this as interactive as possible. I work in this general thing called technology. I think everyone has like some piece of it in their lives, and even though the concept of technology is really broad, there are a few different things that we do. So as mentioned earlier, if I don't know how many of you guys have ever tried looking for a job, but there's this website called Indeed.com, and so one part of my job is really understanding all the websites out there and the different products. Then there's the other piece, which is like less consumer, so like less you and me and more business side. And so then there are like business softwares, and then there's also technology from like the hardware component. So like think about your phone, who makes your phone, then who builds the apps on your phone, and who designs the experience. So that's a little bit about technology. What do I do in my job? So I consider my job a little bit of three different things. So there's one part of my job, which is being a manager. And I think of that as like being a counselor and like a career coach. And then there's the other piece, which is like more around strategy. So making business decisions. If you guys use Instagram, it's things like, should we allow people to send messages on Instagram? Is that better for our business or not? And then the last part is like analytics. So we talk a lot about big data and numbers. So I think a lot of times that can be quite intimidating, but we just like take a lot of data about the things that you're doing online or the way that we understand the world, and then we simplify those into business decisions.
Cool. So a lot of, different industries here and backgrounds. And thank you guys for those introductions. So one question, actually, before I go ahead, I think Jessie brought up a good thing about making this interactive. So what we're going to do is, the way this is going to be formatted is we're going to kind of go through these 4 questions first, and then we're going to open the last 10-15 minutes up for students to ask questions. So I think Isabella already asked one, but we'll keep that for the first question at the end. So moving forward here, within your field, what skills do you see being, more relevant in a post-pandemic world, right? With COVID-19 going on, it's changed the way we live, changed the way we work. And I think this question is of great interest for our students, especially because a lot of them will be graduating, going to college. Some of them are in college and they want to know, what should they work on or what should they focus on in the coming days and weeks?
Yeah, and I'll start. I guess within my firm and similar firms, like audit firms, finance firms, there was already a large degree of remote working capabilities. I know my firm had promoted that for a while now, having the ability to work from home remotely. But it's always been a team environment where you're collaborating and working with other individuals. So especially now, for example, my office will continue to be closed and will be open in slow phases going forward. It's important, especially for the junior members, to be able to work remotely on their own with, and keeping a constant stream of communication with the managers or even the higher ups to ensure that the work's being done, what stage they're at, and how the process is going on the certain projects that we're implementing and doing. So it is a lot of team building skills that are required. Most of them that you learn in school while you're working, especially in college when you're working in team environments. But I would imagine as we go forward, even in colleges now, that a lot of it will kind of be trained more towards the virtual world, where how do you take that team building aspects that you usually learn in person, which in small groups of 3, 4, 5, how do you transition that to a virtual world? So that'll be important. I think a lot of firms are still trying to figure out how effective it is, and if it is a seamless transition. But it is gonna have to focus on communication skills in particular, in my opinion.
So I'm hearing adaptability and like communication, are some of the most important things, we can definitely work on during this pandemic. Thank you.
I can go next, Vishal. So the way I'm going to approach this question is in 2 parts. I'm going to talk about the skills that are relevant right now during the pandemic, and then the skills that are relevant in the post-pandemic world. So engineering and medicine are very, very relevant right now during the pandemic. Just to give you a few examples of what myself and some of my classmates are working on. There's a group of us that's working on using 3D printing technology to create open source ventilators for the hospitals in the area. It's going to be open access, right? So it's accessible to the masses. To give you another example, there's a group that's looking at improving mask technology. That's all I can say about that one for now, just because I'm not privileged to share more. But there's the world is your oyster when you're trying to find gaps, like what's currently going on during the pandemic and how can I fix that, and then going ahead and fixing it, right? And the word that we like to use for this is something called translational medicine or translational research. So when most people think of research, they think of someone sitting in a lab for the next 30 years trying to find the next protein molecule that's going to solve X disease, right? That's called wet lab or wet research or bench research. But in translational research, it's more taking things from what we call bench to bedside in a really quick manner. So that's actually going to be very relevant in the post-pandemic world. We no longer have the liberty to sit there and wait 20 years for something to come out, right, and improve the patient experience. We need things now, and we need things quick. So it's about identifying what's going on with patients and what are they currently suffering from and how can we solve that, and then quickly translating those into solutions, into innovations, and bringing those into hospital environments pretty quickly. As Raul mentioned as well with remote working, so telemedicine has seen a huge boom over the last 2-3 months. People flirted with the idea of telemedicine for the last few years, but it never really took off until 2020. And it has really opened up access to physicians and other healthcare providers that people didn't necessarily have access to. So think of your rural areas and your rural communities. So telemedicine, if you equip yourself with the skills in telemedicine, then you're going to stay relevant for a really long time in this field.
Cool. I think that's a great transition for Jessie here to kind of talk in with technology and what's going to happen with that moving forward.
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of the opinions that were shared here. So a big skill that I think is out there is innovation. And innovation is kind of a broad term, so I'll narrow that down a little bit. So I work for Expedia, which is a travel company. And like most of you, I haven't been on the road or traveled at all in the last few months. So as you can imagine, it's been a really tough time as a company because we're not making as much money. And so we think a lot about what does it mean to innovate travel at a time when we know that we may be putting people's lives at risk if we ask them to fly, or if we ask them to go stay in a hotel where there may be a lot of other people. And so some of the things that we've started to see is this slow trend of rebound. So before I worked for Expedia, I worked for the small company called VRBO or Verbo. Really similar to Airbnb, it's a vacation rental business. And what we started seeing a few weeks ago was that we were seeing a drive or a growth in our vacation rental business and not so much our hotel business. And so we were able to pivot really quickly and start thinking about how we help people find places for them to stay if they still want to go on vacation that are safer. And so what's unique about a vacation rental is that you're not so much near a lot of people. You can rent out an entire home. And it could be all the people you know. We could block off dates where before your stay and after your stay, no one else is staying there. We could send in cleaning crews that do a spray down. There's a lot of things that we can do to change the way that people think about travel. So I think one part of innovation is coming up with ideas on how to make other people's lives easier. And that's not just a skill. So like, that's like the high level skill of how to like improve your business. But I also think that from like from a work standpoint, it's also really valuable, because I think the second part of that is like the results and solutions driven mindset. We talk a lot about like the big picture and being able to solve problems, but on the day-to-day, it's really being able to tackle an issue concretely, because as we get more and more complex in the way that we're thinking about things, it's important to have people who are willing to just like roll up their sleeves and do the work. I know that that may not be very pandemic specific, in that I think it's always a relevant skill, but especially during a pandemic when people are like cutting costs and reducing employees, like one of the most valuable things that I see is like when someone's like, I can do this work, and even if I can't, I'm gonna learn how to do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what you're saying about innovation and, you know, kind of the push for, especially now with COVID, is something that's been going on everywhere, even for example, our schools, right? I think virtual schooling wasn't really something that was on a lot of people's minds, but I think now, you know, this pandemic has completely changed the way we go to school, the way we learn, because we still have to do those things at home no matter what. So yeah, I think those are, you know, really great answers. So the next question is something that, you know, is geared towards our students here. Was there anything in all of y'all's progression in your high school or college experiences, you know, that was relevant in shaping your career progression? Was there a mentor? Was there an internship? Was there some kind of job opportunity that changed, you know, your viewpoint on what you do now and made you want to go into that field?
I'll start off. I'd say, especially in high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do afterwards. I know a lot of individuals early on, they kind of have a clear idea of what direction, what career they want to get involved in later on, what they want to study. I really didn't have a clue, to be honest. So it was really for me getting experience in a lot of different things. I joined various organizations in college just to see what I would like more. I actually started out as an architecture major and figured out relatively quickly that I was terrible at architecture as much as I liked it. So I transitioned between exploring different clubs and opportunities, and ultimately found finance was what I liked the best. Now, within finance, it's a broad field. There's a lot of different jobs you can have in finance, and I think that's where the mentorship, you know, seeking people in the industry really helped out a lot, seeing where I would fit in the best. So, in my opinion, I guess my advice would be to open, especially if you don't know what you want to do, is to open up yourself to a lot of different clubs, opportunities, meet people from, you know, different areas, and see where you may not know what you want to do, or you may think you know what you want to do, but you will, through these experiences, you may realize that it's actually something else that you want to get involved in. And certainly seek mentors. As a freshman in college, for example, even seniors that are in college will have gone through 3 years of college and know what to do, what not to do, learn from their mistakes. And especially early on in your career, seek older mentors in your industry and your work. You got to remember, a lot of these people were in your shoes, and everyone's made mistakes, but if they can tell you what mistakes they made, you can certainly avoid those.
Yeah, I think, go ahead, Ramez.
Well, I was going to say, very similar to Raul, I can't think of any formative experience in high school that shaped this path. I didn't know what I wanted to be in high school. My major was actually in chemical engineering in college. So I went to UT Hookham for chemical engineering, and I graduated. So even in college, I didn't know that I wanted to go into medicine. So I graduated as a chemical engineer. I worked in oil and gas for a few years, and then I decided I didn't really like working in the engineering industry in oil and gas. So I switched to management consulting. So I did that for a while, some more on the business side of things. Left that after a few years, and that's where I am now. So the best advice I can tell you is, so going back, if I have to think back, don't follow my footsteps. It's like I had to go back to school, right? So if you want a career in medicine, you kind of have to start preparing for that ahead of time. And what I mean by that, from freshman year of college, ideally, right? You have to start getting involved in the right organizations, start doing research, start doing outreach, volunteering, and so on. So best advice I can give is go out and shadow physicians out there. Figure out that medicine is what you want to do, because people can clearly tell if medicine is something they want to do or if it's not something they want to do, right? So kind of figure that out pretty early on, and if it is something that you're willing to explore, just get involved. The best thing I can tell you is that when admission committees are looking for medical students, qualified medical students, they try to find long-term interests. So don't get involved senior year of college when you're applying to medical school. Get involved early, because they're looking for that longitudinal connection to the field, right? So get involved in research, get involved in student organizations, leadership positions, and definitely find a mentor. The world of medicine is extremely vast. There are hundreds of different fields that you can get into, and you can kind of create a niche for yourself. So find a mentor in something that you may like, and keep in mind that your interests are also going to change, right? So even me as a medical student now, my interests when I was applying to medical school are different than what I want to do now in the future. So be flexible with yourself. Don't feel stubborn that just because you picked one area, you have to stick with it. But yeah, find a mentor early on. And if any of you are interested in combining engineering and medicine, or even just regular medical school, definitely feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you for that.
So, yeah, I spent most of high school and college knowing exactly what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and I interned at 3 law firms over college and high school. I did debate. I also dabbled with the possibility of becoming a diplomat, and so I studied international relations. And then obviously I didn't do any of those things. I took a job at a law firm right out of college, and pretty quickly realized that I didn't want to be a lawyer. I really appreciate being able to do things outside of work and not work more than 8 to 12 hours a day. And so just kind of watching that lifestyle at a firm made me realize that pretty soon. And so I quit my job within 6 months and then moved abroad. So I'd always wanted to live abroad, and I figured, like, I just graduated, I paid off all my student loans, I should take this time to do what I want. And so I moved to Beijing. I started as an intern. So I quit my full-time job to be an intern at the US Embassy. And at that time, I figured, like, okay, I'll work at the embassy, I'll meet some companies, and then I'll figure out what I want to do after that. So I interviewed at Lockheed Martin. I interviewed at like Procter & Gamble, a lot of like household names, because they were really big companies in Beijing. One of my friends came up to me one day. We were just having dinner, and we just chatted about this like startup that he was joining, and he sold me on it. And within 2 weeks, I had started this company with less than 50 people. It was a big risk, and I ended up working a lot. So over a period of 2 years, I worked out of 4 cities. So I lived in between Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Beijing, and also dabbled a little bit in Chengdu. And so I was traveling a lot. But what I loved about that experience was that we were able to grow a company from 50 people to 2,000 people. And I learned a lot throughout that experience. So all that to say is that, like, I don't think you need to know what it is that you want to do. If you know what it is that you want to do, you should be willing to part with that to do what it is that you feel compelled to do when you learn more about anything. I didn't think I would end up in tech. I did that for a little bit and then realized like I was working as much as I would have if I wanted to be a lawyer, and then moved back to the States, and I had very much a 9-to-5 job. And bring that kind of back to the high school college piece, I think the 2 things that really enabled me to do that were just like a curiosity to learn everything out there, and the humility to like know when you don't know enough about something and be willing to learn from other people. And I think that like it's easy to lose that sense the older you get, because you think you know more. But when in reality, like, you could be an intern at any phase. And I'm thinking about going back to school now. And if I go back to school, then my summer I will be an intern. And so I'll be going from like a senior manager to an intern. But I don't really see a problem with that because you're just using this as an experience to better understand the world and also what it is that you want to do. So that's one piece. And then I think the second piece is like being able to like synthesize everything, your experiences, and know what's valuable to you. In college, I'm sure as anyone will attest to, there's a million things going on between clubs and classes you can take and people you can spend your time with. But knowing what's core to you and what you value at the end of the day will really help you guide and be more specific without like encountering a lot of burnout.
Great. So, I mean, one thing I think I heard throughout all three of them is, Steve, being open-minded, being curious, being flexible, always going out there and trying new things. And, this is something I always try to push my students to do as well, because I feel like taking on any type of role in any company or any, organization, I think it pushes you to learn more about yourself. And I think, that's one of the best things you can do when you're young and you're still figuring things out, because you can learn, like, is this something I like, something I don't like? So thank you guys. So moving forward here, one of the things that we believe in at PEAC is that service and leadership go hand in hand. So what is the role service has played in making you a leader in your current field?
Well, I think we can bring this back to the global shapers, all four of us involved in that organization. For the most part, leaning towards our interest in service and implementing projects that benefit our communities and just international relations and whatnot. I'm not sure how it directly ties to the job, my job in general. I mean, eventually networking and is an important part of my job. The higher up you go, the more you're required to sell. So from a networking perspective, it certainly helps. Career-wise, the service aspect is just something that's more personal and interests me. It's more of an interest. I think a lot of us share that in common. There are certain careers, it may be more beneficial, but in my company in general, I think you have a lot of like-minded individuals that do value, think it's important to give that back to the communities for certain purposes, not necessarily for business purposes. And my firm as well contributes a lot for pro bono work, or pro bono litigation work, or Habitat for Humanity types of projects, not necessarily because that they help the organization from a profit perspective, but just because, again, you're in general individuals who like to succeed in college and in their professions do have this other side, these other passions that kind of go hand in hand. I mean, you are interested in just going out there in communities and providing certain, service types of volunteering activities, just simply just because they're good. I mean, they're good to do. It's good to get involved in those kind of things.
Great, thank you for that.
So Vishal, you actually made me think back to some of the things that I wrote in my personal statement for medical school with this question. But a quote that I like that someone had mentioned during orientation one time was, we want to use medicine as a way to make our community better and use our communities to make medicine more fulfilling. So service and leadership definitely go hand in hand in medicine. I think that's very important. I think you can't be a leader in medicine without a service component. And by being a physician, you're also the leader of a care team, right? So other healthcare providers look up to physicians, and you can't assume responsibility in that role without first serving your community, serving your patients. It's a vital part and it's a vital component of that career. And it's honestly, that's why a lot of medical schools also focus on the service piece, right? They're trying to gauge your empathy towards people, towards humanity, right? So yeah, I mean, definitely, yeah. I mean, yeah, I just think they definitely go hand in hand. you can't have leadership without service in medicine, for sure.
Yeah, no, I like how you connected like the, community. You use medicine, serve your community, and you want your community kind of help you make medicine easier. I think that's a very interesting, way of thinking about it. And a lot of, I think it's a very important thing, like you said. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I'll second the fact that you shouldn't do things because it'll help you get ahead in the world. But if that is how you're thinking about it, being valuable in service and leadership and finding the importance of that or finding the time to do that will also help you in your career. And the way that I think about this is that when I'm interviewing two people and one of them can talk about why inclusion and diversity is important to them and what they've done versus someone who has never done that, I'm always going to pick the person who I think will make the workplace better. And so that has been, I think, like, at least in my personal roles or in my personal experience, my leadership, like my manager and my VP have all really highlighted that as a part of their values as well. So to give an example of that, so when I was at Indeed, I led and founded their Asian affinity group. And now at Expedia, I do that same thing. And my VP, she is the executive co-sponsor. So they have senior people who say that like inclusion and diversity is important to me and I'm going to set aside X amount of time. And so I think there is a networking component of it where you meet people from across the company, and if you need something, you always know someone within a different part of the company that you otherwise may not meet. But I think it also improves your own ability to work and how much you like your workplace. Knowing that my coworkers find it valuable to learn about other people's cultures or their disabilities or their backgrounds is really important to me feeling like I can be who I am at work. And I think that goes beyond, I think like a lot of times like we cover the general like race, ethnicity, but then it also goes beyond that to include things like maybe my coworker has a particular disability. I've had a lot of coworkers who will tell me because I speak quietly that they can't always hear me. And so even being conscious of how you present, and especially now that like we're all remote, being very clear in how you speak can help others. So I think the service component is like two-parted. It's like, how can you create a better world for the one that you work in? And also how can you create a better experience for everyone else, right?
Yeah, I mean, no, I definitely second the motion about, I think what both you and Raul, Jessie and Raul kind of said about the networking part. Because I think even me wanting to be involved in service, serving the community, I wouldn't have been able to meet you all and, put on these great panels. So I think it's always important to get involved. And even if, you're a very selfish person, I think it is going to help you out, even if you don't see it in that moment. So yeah, I definitely agree with you all on that point. So this is probably going to be our last question here, and then we'll kind of open it up into Q&A. This is kind of like a little bit getting off of the last question. How do you stay up to date on the evolving needs of your community, right? Like, how do you know like what the problems are? How do you know like what's going on? Is there anything specific you guys do? Things like that.
I think this will tie back to our group, the Global Shapers, and the requirements for membership that you kind of have that allow for this to happen. The hubs aren't encouraged to have people from one type of background, from one type of industry, from one type of job. The point is to have people from a diverse groups of backgrounds from lawyers, consultants, engineers, to healthcare, to teachers, to nonprofit, to everything. So between the whole group, all 20 to 50 members, you're able to assess what the needs of communities are. Clearly, I won't really have visibility into that, and not much time outside of work and family to really investigate it in areas of healthcare or areas that may deal with education. But by having you and by having Ramez on the group, I can have more insight into that. So To me, it's been just getting involved in these organizations where you have a diversity, and the Global Shapers does require that diversity to be able to see what leaders in those fields see as the needs for the communities. And I think for the most part, the Shapers does a great job of doing that.
Yep, totally agree.
I agree with Raul. I mean, I'm going to approach this question by looking at the immediate community, so the immediate healthcare community, and then the community as a whole. So when it comes to the immediate healthcare community, the best way to stay up to date is to just keep an ear to the ground and just listen to your patients and listen to what problems they come to you with, right? And then being able to identify those gaps and those needs, and then work on them, right? Either come up with solutions or innovations and so on. That's what I'd like to call kind of like the direct connection that you have with a patient. Otherwise, you know, going to conferences, staying up to date on social media when it comes to, so there's a huge medical education movement on Twitter called MedTwitter, #MedTwitter. Just staying up to date on what's going on with other fields is really the best way to stay relevant with what's going on with the community. But with regards to the larger community, what Raul said was perfect. Being able to hear people's different perspectives and what they bring from other industries, and sharing what they feel like the needs are for the community as a whole. I mean, that's really how the world progresses, right? It's if you try to take every industry and have them innovate or solve needs in vacuum, then it's not going to work, right? You need that cross collaboration between people, between industries, and that's what the Global Shapers is all about. It's about connecting everyone from all these different backgrounds.
I totally agree. Jessie, do you want to kind of like finish us off here?
Yeah, happy to. This is really important to me because I feel like I am overrepresented in so many areas. I mean, there's definitely places where I feel like I'm the minority, but even among Asians, like I'm Chinese, that's like a predominant, like most of the time people make assumptions that all Asians are Chinese anyways. And so it's really important to me that I'm staying relevant and also really hearing the needs of others, especially in the communities around me where I feel like I may be the majority voice. So how do I do that? I think it's two-parted. Like one part is just being uncomfortable. Before I went to college, so I grew up here in Austin, I thought I would either go to UT or I would go out of state. I really wanted to go out of state. I ended up going to school outside of Boston. My first 2 years at college, I was really homesick, and I think I just like it was a lot of culture shock to go up to the Northeast where I had like spent most of my life in the South. So it was things like I didn't know. I went to a predominantly Jewish college, and I didn't know that much about like any holidays. The University of Texas is very different from like a small liberal arts school, and so I felt not very at home. But I think in that experience, probably by junior year, I settled in more, and I just like grew so much in being not comfortable. So I think it's important to like challenge yourself and push yourself outside the boundaries of what you know, and that has to do with like listening and caring about others. And then I think the other piece of that is like having diversity in your friends. It's really easy, especially if you're in high school, like you have the friends that you have because you probably live in the same neighborhood, or you probably have something in common with them. And so finding diversity in your friends can broaden your understanding of the world. I'm not saying go out and like make a list of all the different types of friends that you need, but be proactive and be conscious to who you're choosing as your friends. And like there is some level of importance in surrounding yourself with a group of people that you're learning new things from every day.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what all you guys are saying, and I think one thing that I think Ramez talked about a little bit was like the social media part. I think Twitter is something that I've been using a lot recently, and it's a great avenue for just learning about new things that are going on. Because a lot of the things I would have never been exposed to if I wasn't on Twitter. And I think that's one of the ways I definitely, learn about what's going on, in the social aspect of things, and just stay up to date about what's happening. So, yep, that ends our, series of set questions. We can open it up here to Q&A for our members of the audience. And then you can either come off of mute and say it, or just put it in the chat and I can go ahead and read it for our panelists.
Hey guys, thank you Raul, Jessie, and Ramez for sharing your time with us. I posted my question in the chat, but I'll just go ahead and read it out loud. You guys have all mentioned the role of teamwork in your jobs. What sort of skills and backgrounds do you look to surround yourself with when you're working on a team? And how do you figure out what you're missing? Thank you.
Yep.
That's such a good question that I'm going to think about it for like 5 seconds at least.
Personality is a big one, at least in my field, in my teams. There's got to be an element of respect between the group and open-mindedness, and especially with junior members, just and a willingness to, even if you don't agree with something, do the job essentially that your manager asks you to do. There have been instances where attitude or certain levels of entitlement between individuals can cause problems. You've got to realize that you're always learning, always willing to do the work, especially as you move up in an organization, and with a smile. And I think the strongest, at least from the junior level perspective, the strongest analysts that we've had have always been very pleasant to work with. Have always had yes, I can do mentalities, and if they disagree with something, then they'll say it. They won't shy away from it, and they have a certain curiosity that allows them to do that. And we're respectful enough where it's all right. Well, we'll switch methodologies and we'll switch our opinion, and we'll hear them out. But the last thing you really want is someone with a certain level of attitude that would bring the team dynamic down. I mean, you don't all have to be best friends within the team, but you have to be able to work together in a respectful manner.
Thanks, Raul.
Yeah, that's definitely a loaded question. I mean, some people base their entire careers on figuring this question out. But like you mentioned, that teamwork is of utmost importance, and no one likes to work with someone who isn't a team player. Raul mentioned a great point about personality. I think that's key. One other thing in terms of skills that I didn't learn this in medicine. I actually learned this from my previous job in management consulting, but it's about really identifying each individual's strengths and weaknesses on a team and finding ways to complement those gaps so that when you have the team as a whole, it's pretty cohesive, right? It's very easy to try to find someone who shares the same strengths as you just because you feel more comfortable working with that person, but then you end up realizing that there's a huge deficit in terms of the team, right? So definitely identifying strengths and weaknesses and just different skill sets, right? Just because someone has a different skill set doesn't mean that they do their job worse than you, right? They're just better at some things than you are, and you're better at some things than they are. And then that beautiful cohesion is what makes a team productive.
So I want to speak to a little bit of a different perspective. So like when I was a manager and I got to hire everyone on my team, it was great because I was like, okay, you're going to do this thing, and like we're going to hire you for this strength. But in my most recent managerial job, like I walked into a situation where the team was already there and I was the new person. And so I had no say over who we were going to hire. And at the same time, I knew that we had to bring ourselves together as a team. And so the way that I like to run things is that I start with everything being a level set, and we're going to agree that we're all going to be cordial, we're all going to respect each other, and we're all going to like hear things out even if we disagree, and that people can always speak their opinion. And I don't mind if we have disagreements. I don't mind if we have conflicting personalities. What's most important to me at the end of the day is that we have a common goal and we're all working towards that goal without sabotaging each other. And so the two things are like problem-solving mindset and also just the importance of the placement of others ahead of yourself. So rather than thinking about like, how can I best benefit from this project, it's how can we collectively solve this problem? And maybe that's the definition of teamwork, but I would argue that like there's like a deeper, it's not just working together, but it's also seeing the success of your team.
Thank you guys so much for your answers.
Yep. I think the next question, we'll come back to Nandita's. Sabi was asked, what is one piece of advice that you can give us for our first year of college? Anyone want to take that?
So something that Jessie had mentioned actually earlier, I think it was the question about her high school experience, but just being open, right? Being open and exploring anything that comes your way. And I don't mean that just in a professional sense as in looking for your job, right? Like when I think back to freshman year, I wasn't really focused on career. I was trying to adjust to college, right? New friends, new environment, dealing with the increase in workload, studying and tests and all that. But I would say just get involved in terms of exploring different careers. So I don't know if any of you are going to UT, they do a lot of career exploration freshman year. You get to attend a lot of, and I'm sure other schools do that, like Texas A&M and so on, but you get to attend these different workshops where they bring speakers very similar to what we're doing now. And you get to ask all the questions you want and you get to set up all these mentoring opportunities. But yeah, my biggest advice is to keep a very open mind about what you may be interested in.
Yeah, and follow up. I mean, certainly join organizations and clubs and make friends with the officers of those clubs and organizations that are typically going to be juniors and seniors, and see what they've done, how they got there, what they would do again if they were freshmen. Visit your career services office. I mean, they're there to help you out. They're usually helping the juniors and seniors out, but their job is to help all the students out. And there may be opportunities for freshmen and sophomores that very few freshmen or sophomores are going to be looking into that they could help with. And just the more of a relationship you have with them, the easier it'll be as you further become a sophomore and junior, and for them to be able to help you out. And additionally, it's not all about finding jobs and finding a career. Also, join organizations that are for fun, whether it's sports or leisure, or make friends in your hobbies as well. So don't stress too much out. Enjoy it as well.
Great. I think we got two more questions here. I think someone said, I think Abigail said, what is the opportunity cost of taking a fun job or an internship in my field of study? That's a good way of putting it, finance-wise, economically. That's an interesting question.
I think you should always do it. I'm always for that, like, life is short and you should prioritize the things that you want to do. I mean, look, I don't want to speak blanketedly. I don't want to make this a blanket statement, because that's not, it will really depend on your own situation. I think you should find a balance between maybe take 1 or 2 summers to do the thing that will help you in your career. But also, like, something that you identify as a fun job or internship could actually be a career. And so I really wouldn't limit yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If you find yourself in an internship and you don't enjoy it at all, and you don't see that you would enjoy the job that the people working in that internship and in the actual jobs of that company have, then it's probably not going to be the right career for you. So to a certain degree, there should be a level of enjoyment in whatever internship you have and the career you want to have. Work's not always going to be fun, but there should be some level of enjoyment in what you do.
And I'd like to add that if sometimes that fun job ends up being what gets you ahead or gets you that other position that you may have wanted. So to give you an example, I had that same dilemma 12 years ago in 2008. I was deciding between a 6-month internship in traditional oil and gas versus a 6-month internship with Crayola, where I got to learn how to make crayons and markers. And that's actually what I did. So I went all the way to Pennsylvania, and I took a job there for 6 months. It was an internship. To this day, I still know the formula to how to make a crayon, but I can't share it because I signed a piece of paper. But it was honestly one of the most entertaining and interesting jobs that I've had. And to this day, it still comes up on any sort of interview or anyone who kind of like looks into my background. To this day, they ask me about, hey, can you tell me about what you did at Crayola? Because it sounds unique, it sounds fun. And yeah, just don't limit yourself. You never know.
Wow, I was gonna ask you about how to make a Crayola, but I guess you put that out there.
Yeah.
So we'll do one last question here. I think Emily said, "What is something you wish you knew as a college student before starting your professional career?" And then she said, "Would you do anything differently if you had to do it over again?"
I
I
would
mean,
just take more time off. I would just like take a break. I don't know. Like I'm a pretty serious, like when I do something, I do it 100%. And it's easy to like see only the road that's ahead of you. And so I wish I almost always wish I had taken more time off. Like whether it was like a gap year between high school or college, or just taking some time off before college. Uh, and would I do anything different? But like that said, if I would do anything differently, I wouldn't. And I didn't take time off. And so I would give yourself the sympathy of knowing that like you can do anything and go the exact opposite direction at the same time. And so yeah, it's not a great answer. You're gonna have to give me more detail. We're gonna have to talk offline more specifically about that.
no, I mean I can second that too. I think when I was in college, I was like, oh, I got to work really hard, and then you don't really enjoy it as much as you know. I still enjoyed it, but like you wish you could have taken more time and done um, more exploration. And I don't know if I would do anything different. It's too soon to tell, but I'll let you guys know soon.
Wait, sorry, can I add something to the do something differently though?
Yep.
Okay, so I would talk to your professors more and like just hang out with your professors. Like I know that sometimes, and choose the right professors, but like I've had some really awesome professors I wish I got to spend more time with when I was on campus, who like they were either doing rad research or like they were just like living these incredible lives. And I wish I just like spent more time with them, grab coffee, grab lunch. They're generally willing to do that.
And I'll add something that's specific to anyone in the audience that might be pre-med or thinking about medicine. So if you are pre-med, then you probably already know that it's a pretty unforgiving path. You kind of have to, and I don't mean that to scare you or to say anything like that, but most people who are pre-med are like laser focused on the end goal. But the way I see it is, and like they don't afford themselves to make any mistakes, and I need to get an A in every single class and be involved in like 17 organizations and all that stuff. But really at the end of the day, you need to be more forgiving, right? And leave some room for yourself to breathe. Otherwise you're going to burn out really early. There are some people in my class in med school and they're already burnt out. Well, how are you going to finish med school? How are you going to start practicing as a physician? So it's the the very popular saying, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? I think that can be applied to anything in any career and anything in life, but it really is like that. So don't burn yourself out too quickly in college. Just take it easy and don't be too hard on yourself. So what if you got to be, right? Or so what if you joined this organization a little too late, right? Just be human, right? And I think one thing that they look at during interviews as well is, are you human or are you like part machine or part robot, right? So yeah, just be human.
Great. So I think that does it for our panel 2 for Leadership and Service series. I want to thank our panelists again for taking time out of their day to come and speak with us. We really appreciate it. This panel will be online. It'll be on YouTube. We will share the link with you guys, and it'll be on the PEAC USA website. Thank you for everyone that attended. And if you would like to see any questions or you had any feedback, please fill out the survey that was in the email. We hope you guys had a great time, and we'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Yeah, I'll
Thank you all.
also send you my email, and anyone can feel free to email me.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
The contact information was in the beginning, wasn't it, Vishal?
No, we can share that with everyone later if you guys want.
Awesome.
All right, thanks guys. Yep, we'll send that out to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.